Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody. Got some visitors with us. It's good to have them here. We are continuing our look at the Son of Man. And the last two Sundays we've spent on this, we started in Matthew 16, where Jesus asked the question, who do the people say the Son of Man is? And one of the things I've learned, both just by studying as well as some podcasts I'm listening to, is that Jesus never referred to himself as the Messiah, as the Christ, as Jesus Christ. I mean, which would be in third person, but he just never did it. And I found that very interesting that he never projected that out. But most of the time, he referred to himself as the Son of Man. And we went back and looked a little bit at Daniel 7 that brings that up, that the Ancient of Days comes in after these statues were shown in this dream. And as the Ancient of Days came, the rock came and blew the statue up, and one like the Son of Man comes along who has a kingdom, will get a dominion, etc., etc. And so all of these centuries after Daniel 7, we find this idea of the Son of Man. Who's he going to be? What is he going to do? And then Jesus shows up on the scene and identifies himself as the Son of Man. So we're going to look today at two, maybe three different places that speak about this and how Jesus refers to himself and what these things say about all of those things. So we'll be in John chapter 5 today. John chapter 5 and verse 27. And one of the things I want to encourage you guys to do, whether this is necessarily helpful or beneficial to you, is as you're looking at a verse or a section of verses, or maybe even a parable, a story, whatever it may be that Jesus tells, or really anywhere in the Bible, is as you're looking through it, to try and get a broader context, maybe the whole chapter, maybe the chapter 4, the chapter after, what all is happening in that, to give you a little better context of what's happening within that verse or paragraph or whole story. Because in a lot of situations, it can help us a lot in our study and understanding what's happening there. Okay, so John chapter 5. Pausing, I'm trying to decide if I want to start in verse 1 or we just want to, let's just read all of this. And that way it'll give us some good, as I just said, context. So afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, lay on the porches. And one of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew that he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." So Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on Sabbath, and so the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, "You can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat." Now, just to remind everybody, I'm reading in the New Living Translation.
Which one?
The New Living Translation.
I just wondered, because mine talked about an angel of the Lord which stood before
Yeah.
us, and yours did not.
Yeah. Which translation is that?
American Standard.
Okay, yeah. So verse 13, the man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. But afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "Now you are well, so stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you." And then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him. So the Jewish leaders, verse 16, began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. But Jesus replied, "My Father is always working, so am I." So the Jewish leaders tried all the harder to find a way to kill him. And just a little aside here, you remember a number of weeks ago, we looked for a couple of weeks at these moments when the Jewish leaders didn't want to debate him. They didn't want to get in his face. They didn't want to try and put him in jail. What were they trying to do? Even beyond arresting him, they were trying to kill him. Now, again, sometimes I believe that there are some stories that we are so familiar with that we can kind of walk through them, and there's some things that we may not really process because we've heard them so often. But has it ever kind of both amazed you, and have you ever just stopped to consider there were people within Judaism during the time of Christ as he taught and did his miracles that like they put a hit out on him. I mean, they were trying to kill him. They weren't just trying to arrest him, but they wanted him taken out. Now, if this wasn't in the Bible and the names were different, what would you think about this situation?
Mafia.
What's that?
They were the mafia.
Yeah, that was exactly the word I thought of. You got the mafia going on here. And yet it's the Jewish leaders. It's Jesus. It's within Jerusalem. They're wanting to kill him.
People who've actually seen his miracles
Yes.
and said,
Yes.
no, we're going to kill him anyway.
Yes. Yes. And in fact, after the, which here we haven't gotten to yet, but after the, I'm going to call it the resurrection of Lazarus, they want to kill him. Yeah, Carol.
Well, I just think it's amazing that this man gets up and walks. They see it, and they're not even fazed by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're concerned about, well, this is the Sabbath. You get this on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
I would be like, wow.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like,
But you know, how often do we get caught up with such singular vision? You know, we're literally seeing down one lane, and we can't or don't want to consider anything else. I mean, to your point, they just saw this man that everybody knew was lame, and now he's walking, you know. He's not crawling, he's not limping, or, you know, somebody's helping him. He is fully walking, carrying his own mat. And where does their mind go? You can't do that on the Sabbath. Yeah.
I've met several modern-day Jewish people
Yeah.
in Maui, and they all, every one of them have come back and said the same thing. We did this. We know.
Wow.
And that, to me, that's like amazing, you know?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
for such a long time, every Jew that I've ever met was firmly, you know,
Yeah.
that Christ has not been here.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
the last three very, very faithful Jews
Yeah. Yeah.
have told me that they believe in Christ, that
Yeah.
they miss the boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that they
Interesting.
had to stay, they had so much belief in what they believed that they
Yeah.
stayed in that tunnel vision and they could, even after the miracles, even after the death and after the resurrection, because they had committed to killing him, they could not divert from it, never, you know,
Yeah.
for how many years?
Yeah. Well, many centuries, if not a millennium, you know. And, you know, I've watched a couple of things that I watch on TV. There have been moments where the dad or the granddad or somebody in the family wants this child to be an accountant or a doctor, or name whatever profession, and they keep pushing the idea that this is what this kid wants. You know, it's what he's always wanted. And if you really sit down with the kid and say, what do you want to do? He says, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. This is really where my heart is. And so I think there's some serious humanity to the fact that when we get in a lane, I mean, how many of y'all have experienced when you get in a lane of thought and other ideas are brought to you, how well do you get out of that lane and even consider, much less shift lanes? It's a hard thing for us to do as humans, especially depending upon our upbringing and all those kind of things. So for these men in this situation, and I guess it just amazes me that they're not trying to, spread rumors about him. They're not trying to negate his message or anything. They want to kill him. Really, really blows my mind. And they wanted to kill him, it says, for he not only broke the Sabbath. So what are they upset about here?
Power.
Their power? So for he not only broke the Sabbath, what else was he doing? He's calling God his Father. He's calling God his Father, thereby making himself equal to God. So it wasn't just the breaking of the Sabbath. And I think there's, again, a number of things happening here. There is the power and the influence that's there. And another story we've looked at where they were very fearful of what the Romans might do, what the Jews might do in terms of an uprising. There was a lot of levels and elements going on here. But you also have kind of this popularity that Jesus had. He was going to, the lowest of low. He was going to tax collectors, prostitutes, publicans, people that the Pharisees, Jewish leadership did not consider on their level at all. So again, verse 16, they began to harass Jesus for breaking the Sabbath. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it means they just came to him and had to talk with him. I don't know if that means they were, trying to really humiliate him and intimidate him. That's when I think of the word harass. And yet Jesus' response is not to, again, be on his heels, but my Father's always working, so I'm working. That really, really bothered them. He called God his Father, therefore making him equal with God. So Jesus explained, verse 19, in that verse 19, yeah. I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. Now, as we get closer to verse 27, which is where we're going to be looking at today, I encourage you to notice all of the personal things that Jesus says here about himself and the Father. What did they just get upset with him about? That he called God his Father. But Jesus doesn't step away from that to avoid the confrontation. In fact, what does he do? He doubles down. He's like, all right, let's do this, man. If that bothers you, here we go. Now, I'm not saying he's doing it for those reasons. The Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he is doing. In fact, the Father will show him how to do even greater works than healing this man. Then you will truly be astonished. For just as the Father gives life to those who he raises from the dead, so the Son gives life to anyone he wants. In addition, the Father judges no one. Instead, he has given the Son absolute authority to judge, so that everyone will honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Anyone who does not honor the Son is certainly not honoring the Father who sent him. So up to this point, because we're kind of hitting a new direction here, what has he done up to this point? that they're upset with him because he called the Father, God the Father, Jehovah, his Father. They called God Father. So what has he done here? Yeah.
So in a roundabout way, he's kind of told them, you're going against God's will.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
going to put them on the defense.
Right.
Because God
God has appointed. Right, right. God is working, and he's telling me what he's doing. God and I are working together.
Right, and that goes totally against what they teach.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
discredits them in front of people, so then you've got a humility thing going.
Yeah. Now, notice with that comment, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but there are times whenever, of course, Jesus tells people that he has healed or taught, whatever the case may be, to not share his name, not promote what he did. And then there's other times when he tells them, hey, go out and tell everybody. And I believe the case for that is when he's in a Gentile area, go share the word. When he's in a Jewish predominant area, shut your mouth. Don't say anything. Essentially because his time hadn't come yet. And yet in these moments, Jesus chooses to stoke the fire, so to speak. He chooses, as he gets closer to Jerusalem and ultimately the trial and his death, he'll stoke the fire with the Jewish leadership. He will say things that are true and that need to be said, but are also going to get them in a bigger lather and are going to get them very much worked up. They already want to kill him. And then he throws these things out. And the closer he gets, the higher that animosity gets. And by the time he gets to Jerusalem, by the time you go through the Garden of Gethsemane, the Jewish leadership has already made their decision. He's a dead man. And not only is he a dead man, but what else do they want to do to him? They're going to beat the snot out of him. I mean, they're just absolutely going to destroy him, like physically, which is what happens.
Well, I want to discredit you.
Yeah, very publicly. Very, very much so.
And the
Yeah.
passage you just read, basically, he's saying that everything he does is from the Father.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that, I'm sure, upset them too.
yeah.
Because they had their idea of how things should be. And
Yeah.
yet he's saying this is the way it has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, there's also something when you look at Matthew chapter 5 with the Sermon on the Mount, you know, the ways I understand it, they were set up that you had these very important authoritative rabbis, and then you had other rabbis underneath. And so if you had something important to say, you refer to a rabbi. It never comes from you. So for Jesus, you know, whenever he said, you've heard not to murder, but not Rabbi so-and-so, I say X, Y, and Z. And so Jesus had a very different approach in terms of how he did things.
You get John chapter 10, and they finally they had enough, and they say, tell us plainly,
Right.
are you the Christ?
Right.
He said, I did tell you that. You're not hearing it. You're not my sheep. You don't understand.
Yes.
The
Been a
works
long
that I
chapter.
do in my Father's name bear witness.
Yeah.
They were captured.
Yeah. Well, and you know, even, I don't remember where I was reading, but when they asked him a question, they came to arrest him. That's what it was in Matthew 26, I think. They came to arrest him, and he was like, I was in the temple courts all the time, teaching. There was never a time, rarely was I like secluded or, you know, in some private place where I didn't want you to catch me. I was always out in public, always teaching. And now you're going to do it in the garden at night in this way. Yeah, Teresa.
Like you said a minute ago, you know, that they're in the right, they'd already made up their mind.
Yeah,
And they weren't open to it being changed.
right. Now, to that point, I very much agree with that. One is because I said it earlier. How many times do you find yourself, I don't know, the older I get, the more I try to study the Jews and this whole context, how different are we from the Jews? In terms of mindset, in terms of how we approach things. And I mean going back to the Exodus up to this point. I don't know, and it may sound a little, not negative, pessimistic. I don't think we're any different at all. How many times do you get your mind on something and you're sure you're right? And no matter what information comes to you that's differently, you're like, nope. Yeah, man.
just going to say that the Jews, consider them the chosen people of God, which they were.
Yes, yes.
But they always viewed it as exclusionary.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference, I think, between the Jewish mentality and the Christian mentality, is that we want to expand that to everybody.
Yeah.
And just to make everyone aware of God and His greatness.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
The other thing that I've always struggled with is, Isaiah says, "And yet, O Lord, you are our Father."
Yeah.
So saying He's your Father and you're His Son is throughout Jewish Scripture.
Yeah.
But here they get very upset because I'm not sure why, honestly.
Well, I've always assumed, and it's not like an assumption because I'm just thinking this stuff, but he just doesn't do stuff their way. He doesn't follow their processes and their rule and their form. And as a result, you're not going to call God your Father because of how you do things, and you don't fit our form, Ty.
Yeah, he was using God as justification for what he did, which was breaking the
Yeah.
Jewish quote-unquote structure.
Yeah.
And that's what they were upset about. You can't say you're God's son because you're not doing the things that we, God's chosen, have said you have to do.
Yeah.
I think we're much different because probably all of us have seen times when we've done things just a little different than we traditionally do, and somebody gets upset. Because that's not how we always did it, even though it has nothing to do with Scripture. So we kind of do the same thing.
Even Malachi has, "Are we not all children of the same Father? Are we not all created by the same God?"
And one of the things I think we find from, we'll say the Jews in like air quotes, is that humanity really struggles with, getting outside of. I'm gonna use a strong word here. A mob. When you have a mob mentality that everybody believes and thinks and has the same ideas, let's see, where is that? Matthew 23, I think. When Jesus, Jerusalem, and he gives that sad monologue about what Jerusalem has done, and he even did it in a parable where the workers went out and they continued to, not the workers, but representatives came from somebody and they kept killing them. Every prophet God sent to you, you either killed him or you made life very, very difficult for them. Your whole heritage generally has been this same type of thing.
It happens in all walks of life.
It does.
When people believe in something and then they realize that and then somebody comes along and says, that's just not right. It's slavery,
Yeah.
We dealt with that. Even my grandparents were a little bit prejudiced,
Yeah.
Even though it's not right.
Yeah.
We have, everybody was trained to believe that for so long that it was normal and natural, and then all of a sudden somebody says, "Oh, that's not right," and it took a war to stop.
Yeah.
And these were all pretty good humans. It's just the way that they were taught and ingrained to believe, and so you have to be brave enough to step outside of what everybody else does and find the actual truth. And some people have, especially in our lifetime, couldn't break away and find their own truth.
Yeah.
You can't help feeling sorry for them, though, because clearly warned against false prophets as well.
Yes.
And so sometimes they're punished for falling away too quickly. Sometimes they're punished for not believing God's true messenger. And it just kind of comes down to the same thing, that you really need a Savior. You're not going to get it right.
Yeah. But to that point, and I initially wasn't going to bring this up, but I find it very interesting that when the truth that I believe, whether it's truth or not, it's what I've been taught, what I know, and what I believe. And when I consider, I think it's 1 John 4 that talks about testing the spirits. Well, what do I test them up against? Well, Andy, it's truth. Well, in no way am I trying to split hairs here or create an issue, but is it truth or is it what I've been taught? And what I've been taught is by good people that I love and good people of character, so why would they be wrong? So what do I match up? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is if I hear something and it doesn't match up to my truth, then it's false. But what if it's not? And what if I have premises and assumptions within what I believe that are off and that aren't accurate? So, yeah. Doug, did you have or Bob?
And there's something psychologists call confirmation bias, which means if I have an opinion, I'm going to support that opinion by finding other people who have the same opinion.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're all right, but I naturally want to find people who believe the same thing I believe.
Yeah.
And somebody who comes in with a different belief, oh, well,
They're obviously wrong.
Obviously wrong, because
Obviously wrong.
all these other people agree with me, so I know we're right.
Yeah. I was listening to and I'll get right back to you, a video, and it was, I was discussing X issue, and the guy was mentioning, which is probably very true generally, if you say you like Fox, and that's mostly what you listen to, you're getting that slant, whether it's right or not, or MSNBC or CNN or wherever it is from. Generally, people find their tribe, their people that believe what they believe, generally. And you have these different camps of people, and if you go to this camp and you're like, are you serious? You actually believe that? Simply because it's not what your tribe believes. So you may have 5 different tribes, and going from one to the other, there are things that I listen to now, and I'm like, how can you, through videos I watch, how can you say that? That's insane. And then I listen to people who believe what I believe, and I'm like, there you go. That's it. Of course that makes sense. That's right. And I have to take about 10 giant steps back and go, okay, wait a minute. Of course they're going to say that, and I'm going to agree with it because that's what I already think. I already believe that. So, we have to be very, Holy Spirit driven to not get caught up in that and to look for actual truth as opposed to just things that we believe and already know.
I wonder what they expected. They were told that Christ would come. They were told most of the ways that Christ would come. They had everything that they needed to see the right, see the truth. What are we going to do when he comes in? How are we going to recognize him? How are we going to, and that's the thing is, he may not come the way that we see.
Yeah.
But are we going to be, our eyes going to be open to be able to, I don't know, did they expect him to come in a Superman costume? That's how they would recognize him? They were told everything, and they still didn't open their eyes.
Well, I'm going to take a little chance here because I obviously we just met, and I agree with you. I'm going to push back a little bit, which I totally agree, because I've thought and taught that for a long time. How could they not know that Jesus was coming? And yet imagine if you have 5 generations of people that Jesus, that the Messiah, not necessarily Jesus, but the Messiah coming, what's he going to look like? Well, of course he's going to look like David. He's the son of David, and that's what's prophesied. David's going to come back. Solomon's going to, it's going to be this, we're going to get our kingdom back. We're going to be like we were when we were successful. Who wants a Messiah from Nazareth? Born in Bethlehem? Seriously? Who were Joseph and Mary? Who are they? They're nobodies. Did Jesus look at all like a Messiah? Did he have any traits of somebody that was going to bring them victory and honor and majesty? No. And yet, to Bob's point, this is a man who over 2.5 years, miracles and the teachings and the way he dealt with people, all of it. The common people, how did they respond to Jesus? Very positively. Very positively. It was that, I don't know, 5% or whatever percentage of it was in the Jewish hierarchy, that it's not that they didn't see it or accept it. It's the influence and the power and how they had things structured that it was really messing stuff up. So,
You know, there were any number of false messiahs before the how do we pick out the right one?
yeah.
Because we've been told that there will be false prophets and false teachers. So yeah, how do we go? No, it's that one. That's the guy who's talking the right stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To push back on your point.
Yeah. I love pushback.
You know, I think, not necessarily in this context of what we're studying today, right now, but
Right.
one of the reasons Jesus was popular because they saw the military potential. He could
Yes.
feed people from nothing. He could raise people from the dead.
Yes.
If you apply that to an army, you're invincible.
Yes.
So I'm sure they had to be thinking, this is our time for our kingdom to rise again.
Yes. Well, even in John 6, at the very end of that lengthy chapter, when they come all the way around the lake to see him, they try to make him king by force. So to that point, I mean, if you can raise the dead and feed people at will, dude, you're the guy. Let's do that. But it wasn't Messiah. You know, it wasn't a spiritual thing. It was purely for, this could be our next David or Solomon or whomever. Doug.
Just what Bob was saying, about false messiahs. Jesus himself, at the end of his ministry, he's about to be crucified. He's about to be beaten and die for our sins. At that point, he tells his disciples, many people will say the Messiah has come. And he tells them explicitly, do not believe them.
Yes.
So even after Jesus' ministry, there were still going to be false messiahs that would come. Even after he died and was resurrected, there would still be these messiahs that would come.
Yeah.
He said, don't believe them.
Yeah. And I think to that point, also, just from a historical standpoint, between, I'm going to push on to 100 AD, between 100 AD and, I don't know, say, I'm just going to throw out 1200. I don't really have a number there. There is a lot of history that happens, a ton of history that happens. And I know when this was brought to my attention, you open up to Matthew chapter 1, and there is a serious amount of history that has happened since, I'm not going to say since Malachi, because Malachi wasn't actually the last book of the Bible in terms of history. There's just a ton of things that happen. So there are a lot of things that are written that Jesus states that if we don't have a tiny bit of appreciation of what's happening culturally at that time, not only can we overlook it, but it's not as meaningful for all the things that were taking place during that time. Go ahead.
And we say Christ, that was the dangerous title. Christ means the anointed one, and only kings are anointed.
Right.
So when you say Jesus is the Christ, you're saying he's the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And Rome isn't going to accept that.
So very quickly, on that note, there are a lot of words today, just in our culture alone, that are very loaded. So you just say them, get a group of 10 people, whether they're strangers or they're good friends of yours, and you can throw out some of these terms, and you're going to get some pretty emotional discussion. They're just loaded. You know what I mean? So at that time, if you're going to call someone the anointed, for us today, it's like, yeah, he's the Christ. I mean, duh, of course he is. Well, you go back 2,000 years, and for people to call him, again, that's what I'm saying. He did not refer to himself as that. Other people called him that, or the gospel writers called him that. Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man generally. But to refer to him as the Christ, it was a very loaded thing. For him to call God his Father was loaded. And it came with a lot of emotion. A lot of things went behind that. For us today, we just read it and we're like, yeah, of course. Why didn't you guys believe this? I mean, absolutely God's his Father. He's the Son of God. He's the Christ. Resurrected. He's all this stuff. But you take your mindset, go back 2,000 years, and you plug it in there, whole different meaning, whole different ideas, whole different, lot of things. Because again, and sometimes we say this in kind of a snarky way. How could they not know? Had everything in front of them. How did they not know? Yeah.
What's that?
What's
How
that?
are you gonna know?
Me
Me today?
Yeah, you met him at the mall.
Well,
You meet him at McDonald's. How are you gonna know?
well, I think for us today, it's 2020. You know, we can look back and, you know, for instance, John 20, when he says that Jesus did a whole bunch of stuff, but what he did was for the purpose of evidence that would cause belief, and belief gives us life. So we can kind of look back. We don't have that same mindset. Now, your question, I think, is a little different. How can we know if we meet him today? And I think that's something that we have to continue to work on ourselves. Make sure our eyes are open. We are in a very holy lane, so to speak, to where we can notice that stuff. There's many times that I know I don't notice it, or I don't want to see it because of wherever my head is at any given moment. Ty?
It's going to be easy.
That's a good question.
The Bible
Huh?
told us every knee's going to bow. He's going to come down. Every knee's going to bow. Trump's going to raise down. We're going to know when he comes again. Everybody will know. There will be
Yes.
no doubt in
Yes.
anybody's mind. Even people who don't believe will know he is the Christ.
Yeah. And maybe I misunderstood your question. Carol?
Well, and I agree with what Tyler said, but also we have in Hebrews 13 where it says, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so,
Yes.
some have entertained angels without knowing it." Well,
Yes.
I've heard people say, "Well, that was just referring to Abraham, and that was for that time." But Hebrews wouldn't have brought it up if it
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
according to us.
Yeah.
And that bothers me.
Yeah.
Because I think, have I been mean to strangers who may have been a spiritual entity
Yeah.
that I didn't know?
Yeah.
And that is similar to what
Yes.
she was saying about
Yes. That's how I took
I
the
just,
question.
that's what I think, is I think
Yeah.
that if we're not, if we're still, I don't care how many trumpets, there's still people that will say, because they don't have what it means to be able to recognize that, they'll still
Yeah.
walk away.
Yeah.
Because they haven't done the work to prepare to know that it doesn't matter how many trumpets, they will
Yeah.
still not see.
Yeah. And you know, this may be a small distinction, but I know for humanity, words matter. And the word that we use for angel, which I think the word angel is a pretty loaded term because people get all kinds of ideas in their mind. The word is just messenger. And he's a messenger for God to do a variety of things. And it's possible that God uses, humans as messengers for ministry, for blessing people, et cetera, et cetera. So whether we are ministering to them or they're ministering to us, is it possible that we are ministering to ministers? We're serving people unaware that God has put in front of us, either to bless us or for us to bless them. And when we miss those opportunities, we're missing what God is doing in front of us. So, yes. Yeah. And I haven't even looked up that word. That one. Oh, absolutely. That's the point. Yeah. Ty?
I think Carol's point, look at what Jesus himself says. Who, when I greet you and I say, well done, you took care of me. Well, what do you mean? I didn't do that. Okay, good. Any person that you took care of that was naked and in need, in jail and in need, you were taking care of me.
Yeah. And so, to that point, when God allows us to be messengers or us other people to be messengers to us, then you've got Matthew 25 and you've got Hebrews, where we're doing those things that if we get too busy in life, in our own lane, we're not going to notice those moments either to serve or to be served and to, take care of people.
That goes back to keep your mind open if someone says something.
Yeah.
It hasn't always aligned.
Right.
Like you think, well, then go back and study.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the worst possibility is if they share stuff with you that you don't agree with. What's the worst thing that can happen? No, I want you to think about it. What's the worst thing that can happen? You just reject it. You don't agree with it. Or maybe they say something you don't agree with and you actually consider it. Maybe they're right. And you've got to make some, differences in your view and stuff. Well, class is over. Thank you guys for your comments. Let's close with a prayer. Loving God, we continue to pray for your Holy Spirit to help us, to guide us, to teach us, to lead us. Father, help us to stay open to our connection with you and with your Spirit, with Jesus, so that we can become more like him.